gentlemen from the Mexican consulate. They have been supportive of our efforts of becoming welcoming community, welcoming state. Introduce yourself.
My name is Lee Wong. I'm the Deputy Consul at the Consulate of Mexico in Kansas City. I really appreciate all the support that we've been doing together. It's really important for us to stress out and emphasize all the contributions that the immigrant community can bring to the United States. It is obviously part of the fundamental work that we do in our private conversations, also in our interactions with public officials, and of course, the community. So we would like to recognize also the efforts of the City of Lawrence in these terms. Thank you.
Bienvenidos, gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you. Glad to have you tonight. All right, next item on the agenda is a proclamation to proclaim the week of July 27th through August 2nd as International Amphibians and Reptiles Week. And do we have somebody here to speak to that? Good evening.
Hi. This may seem profoundly less important than the last proclamation, but my name is Rich Glore. This is Rafe Brown. We're curators and professors at the University of Kansas in the Division of Herpetology at the Biodiversity Institute. For those of you that don't know, the University of Kansas is home to one of the top places in the world to study reptiles and amphibians. And we are pleased this week to be welcoming a large conference of about 500 attendees coming from all over the world to the KU campus. They'll be in town Thursday through Sunday. We do have a few events on our agenda that are open to the public, and we welcome you to explore those events, which are located in the Orient Hotel or in the Union on Friday and Saturday.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Whereas the state of Kansas is home to more than 100 species of reptiles and amphibians, several of them threatened or endangered, all of which are an essential part of the ecology of Kansas, from lakes and rivers to forests and farmland to urban centers. And whereas the University of Kansas Biodiversity Institute will welcome more than 400 international scientists and students of herpetology to Lawrence for the 58th annual meeting of the Society for the Study of Amphibians and Reptiles, July 29th through August 2nd. And whereas the University of Kansas Biodiversity Institute is home to the 5th largest collection of reptiles and amphibians in the United States, with more than 340,000 specimens representing more than 5,000 species from 156 countries, including the largest collection of Kansas specimens in the state of Kansas. And whereas the University of Kansas scientists have been studying reptiles and amphibians since 1915 and are celebrating a century of herpetological research in 2015. Did I get that right? Sweet. All right. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Lawrence, Kansas does hereby proclaim the week of July 27th through August the 2nd as International Amphibians and Reptiles Week, and urges all citizens to learn more about and celebrate the ecological role of amphibians and reptiles in Kansas. Congratulations. I thought you were going to bring us a snake as a present, and I was going to have to decline.
There will be a live animal exhibit in the Orient Hotel from Thursday through Sunday, so come check it out.
Just as long as there's no snakes here, we're going to be okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
We don't deal with politics.
Yeah, there you go. Well played. All right.
You even said herpetological, correct?
I know. Got that. Bummer. Commissioner Boley, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. The delegation of students from our sister city in Japan, Hiratsuka, has come by and provided some gifts for our mayor, and they're having a good time. They certainly did on the 4th floor. They got to look out the window and see all the exhibits that have been the gifts from Hiratsuka over the years. So
excellent.
they send good wishes.
Well, thank you for doing that this week. I appreciate it. So, welcome them to Lawrence. I assume we'll be doing a proclamation for them in the near future, right? Maybe? Okay. Excellent. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted on one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. I'm going to pull item number 7, the urban water slide event. Are there any other commissioners that would like to pull items from the consent agenda?
Mayor, item 4C, if I could, just a question on the change of
4C?
I'd like to pull number 11.
Number 11? Okay. Anything else from the commission? Is there an item on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have pulled for separate consideration? Number 1. All All right. With the exception of items number 1, 4C, 9, and 11, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of 176 claims for $1,951,000. Mayor. Oh,
Number 7?
I'm sorry, I believe you said 9 instead of 7. Perhaps you meant 7.
I didn't. Did I say 9?
You said 7.
Okay. I said it wrong there. Yeah. Items number 1, 7, 4C, and 11. There we go. Thank you. All right. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of claims to 176 vendors in the amount of $1,951,472.75 and payroll in the amount of $2,062,616.32.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded to approve by Commissioner Boley, seconded by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 1.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Sinclair from 331 Johnson Avenue. On the consent agenda, number 1, Bicycle Advisory Committee meeting of 5/18/15. There's a couple of different items I wanted to ask about. One, there was a meeting scheduled for 6:15, and then I imagine there was one for July. I've made inquiries from city staff to try and understand this. I'd like to know the results of what they were going to do on the 5/18, and it was pretty hard to distinguish. I thought the Bicycle Advisory Committee was same as the Pedestrian Bicycle Task Force. It's been a long and winding road trying to distinguish that. However, so I've made a point about the minutes. That would be the action that they said they would take at their next meeting and present reports. But if this committee is related to pedestrian issues as well, I'm going to just make statements of things that were reported in our daily newspaper that I have no personal knowledge of, and an attached automobile report file about an accident. He may be a very nice person, and he may be very helpful to this committee, but I believe if this committee is related to pedestrian issues as well as bicycle, which frequently intersect. Lawrence Police Officer Dan Ashley was reportedly involved in an incident where he backed up his SUV out at Clinton Parkway after dumping out trash into or over an elderly pedestrian at Clinton Lake and causing her critical injuries. She was taken to Stormont Vale, I believe. Some months later, it was decided he would not be charged with this, although he reportedly couldn't remember if he merely hit her or actually ran her over. So again, it's a little confusion about the two different bodies, about the availability of minutes, which I've looked all over for, and just how we, look at this and the issue in the 5/18 minutes, which I don't believe I printed out. One of the things had to do involving I think where there'd been a fatality in a pedestrian incident, and Freedom of Information Act, Sheriff's Office, that kind of thing, getting information, so forth. So that's my concern there. Just that, and I don't know how it was never, I just found a link and found that ending. I don't even know how this lady, if she recovered or whatever. She was said to have at least a concussion and severe facial crushing of bones and maybe some other things. So anyway, that's my concern there. Thank you.
Thank you. The two committees are separate committees. Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Bike Pedestrian Task Force. Two separate committees. Doesn't mean there won't be some overlap, certainly, but they are two separate committees. As far as the minutes, Casey, is that something you can comment on?
About when those minutes will be available?
That's correct.
From the meeting on the June
15th.
meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I know Scott.
Actually, there wasn't a June 15th meeting according to the Bicycle Advisory Committee page. That's the one that says meeting canceled on June 15th.
Okay.
And then the task force didn't start meeting until June 29th. So I just looked and their minutes are up to date as Bicycle Advisory Committee minutes are up to date as of April 20th this year.
The meeting will be added.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other public comment on that item? All right. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve item number 1 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Commissioners Amix and Herbert. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 4C.
Mayor, just a question. I was noticing in the change orders here, there was a discussion point brought up that the city attorney's office would explore and pursue if appropriate the AT&T for reimbursement for the additional costs to the city. And this just be for the one change order number 2. So it's the one that's for $25,380. Okay, and if appropriate. So I'm just trying to get an idea as to when it's appropriate, when it's not.
Well, our initial investigation is that AT&T had some facilities in the street that were discovered once construction was commenced, and we did call for lines to be located, and those lines were not located. And so our office is exploring whether we should file an action in district court, and I want to do some further research before I make that final determination.
Okay. But it's just for the change order number 2. And what is the one for number 1?
That I'd have to defer to Dave Wagner, because I wasn't involved in that.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
I'm sorry, Mike, what was the
Change
question?
order number 1 on that water line project, 23rd Street water line.
Right, not the change order number 2.
Change order number 1.
Okay, so, but you're talking about the other change order that isn't being pursued.
Yeah.
I think, there's just a determination that some of the additional work wasn't related to the fault of AT&T, or we thought the fault of AT&T was related to not locating that facility. So,
Okay, so it all involves the AT&T deal, whether or not we're going to pay for part of it, or we're going to seek some kind of action
right,
to get reimbursement. Okay.
At least that's, I think that's our goal is, that's what happens to us when we hit somebody's utility.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so we're on the other side of it this time.
Okay. That's all I have.
Does that answer?
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dan.
Any public comment on this item? Okay. Time to entertain a motion to approve item 4. Sure. Any public comment on item number 4C? Okay. Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve item number 4C.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve item 4C by Commissioners Amix and Shum. Amix and Herbert. Wow. Sorry.
I did dress
my bad.
like it tonight, didn't I?
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 7 is to approve a street event temporary use right-of-way permit allowing the closure of George Williams Way from south of 6th Street to north of Harvard Road from midnight on Saturday, August 8th to 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, August 9th for the urban water slide. I've not heard anything about this, Mark. You're going to have to fill me in.
I've got a few hours on this item. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Mark Teal, Assistant Public Works Director. We had, city received an application to hold the urban water slide. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a slip and slide that you would put in a backyard, except it's 1,000 feet long and it's fairly wide. Requires a water source and a source to get rid of the water once it gets to the end of the slide. So the footprint is much bigger than you'd have in your backyard. Therefore, they've asked not very many locations to do an event like this. They also need an incline to facilitate the movement on the slide. So they have asked the city through our street event application process to hold this event on a city street. So they've submitted the right-of-way application to us. Just quickly go through the process that we go through when we receive those permits. We've reviewed their traffic control plan that was required to be submitted. It does comply with the manual uniform traffic control for a road closure of this nature. We don't look at it necessarily the event, but we look at the closure. We would treat this as if it was the same as for construction or anything else. So they've got the appropriate Type 3 barricades, the appropriate lane closures, street closures. In this particular instance, because of the closure of George Williams Way, we also required them to have message boards at critical locations, 6th and Wakarusa, as well as Bob Billings Parkway in Wakarusa, notifying motorists in the perimeter coming into that area that they would need to use an alternate route instead of going around where they may normally get to George Williams Way from 6th Street and determine that they would have to go back another way. So that's part of the plan that they're required to have in place. The applicant sent notice out to the neighborhood as required by our process. I want to show you this map. The way that the Public Works Department takes these applications and determines how many or who needs to be notified, we look at the type of the event and the impact to the area. The area outlined in red was what the Public Works Department determined would be warranted for notification. So every address, we generated a postal address database from our system. We provided it to the applicant along with an official city written notice that you see there. This particular applicant, Silverback, decided to also, because of the nature of the event, add some additional language to our notice. So they sent a postcard out. One side was from them, and the other side was the official notice of this action pending tonight before you. That's our standard procedure. I think there was approximately 3,400 addresses that were noticed as a result of that, and we did get quite a few feedback comments through email, and those were posted to the agenda that you've had an opportunity to review tonight. They've also were required to gain permission from USD 497 to use Langston Hughes parking facilities for parking for this event. That permission was attached to your packet tonight. They also were required to communicate with Corpus Christi Church for potential impacts to their services on Saturday and on Sunday. They did that. They were also required to contact the neighborhood association president, and they did, and they had multiple communications on that nature. They did send me, I did also talk with Gwen, and I think her last name is Klinkenberg. I may be mispronouncing that. I had a conversation with her as well, so I do know that Ryan with Silverback and her spoke. I also saw some emails that she was in on, so I know she was in the loop on that. I also saw an email from the father at Corpus Christi Church acknowledging that they had communications, although I was not part of those communications. So I do know that did take place. The other issue that's kind of going on out there is there's a closure currently at Bob Billings Parkway and George Williams Way. Talking with the city engineer, David Cronin, and the contractor out there, they're under the opinion that intersection will be back open before the event, the dates of this event on August 8th or 9th. If for some reason that doesn't happen or isn't going to happen, Silverback, the city, and the contractor would have to figure out a way to get that intersection open for the event. I think that's a critical intersection to have open, so that in other words, if that was closed, the only egress into that neighborhood would be off of Harbor. So we would work to accommodate that, but we have been assured by those in knowledge of that project that that intersection is scheduled to be back open prior to those dates. The applicant also will be required to post no parking signs in the adjacent neighborhood to George Williams Way, not allowing parking on one side of the street. That will minimize the number of people that attempt to park there. Also will allow for emergency access should there be a need to access those neighborhoods. Also, Fire Medical Department, during their review of this application, indicated that they would need to maintain a 15-foot width along George Williams Way adjacent to the slide. They will be able to accommodate that as well. It won't be open to traffic, but it would be open. It would be clear in the event that there's an emergency for fire, medical, or police to be able to come down George Williams Way and access that way. The other thing I wanted to mention tonight for you is there's been no alcohol request submitted with this application. In other words, there will be no alcohol on the public right-of-way allowed during this event. Also, all costs associated with this event will be borne by the applicant, Silverback. Other than my time and staff review time, the city has no cost incurred for this event. And again, just want to reiterate that this event, like all the other event applications that we receive, went through our standard review process, which includes multiple city departments, as well as some of our partners from Explore Lawrence, the Convention Visitors Bureau, DLI. We just have a standard set of people that get eyes on these types of events, so we can get the maximum amount of feedback and potential impact. Also tonight, Ryan Robertson is here, and he would like to explain a little bit more about the event, if you would like.
Before we do that, do we have any questions for Mark?
Do we have any standard process for timing of how soon before you want to close a road you have to submit the application? Is there any set process for that?
Commissioner, our permitting process does allow the city to take up to 60 days to review a permit. We try to accommodate these applications as they come in, not only for events but for construction. Staff is typically shorthanded when these comes in. We deal with hundreds of temporary right-of-way permits a year. Last year we had 56 event permits that we processed, and I can't tell you how many hundreds of construction-related permits. But the process does allow us to take up to 60 days. I can tell you we typically don't take that long. The one exception would be when we have to hold a public hearing. The city code requires us to notice the affected school or church 30 days prior to the public hearing, so that sometimes takes place. I work hard with the applicant when I get these applications to try to get them processed and reviewed, but we've never had an opportunity where we had to put an application in front of you all before it's gone through the full review process.
Seems like it might be a good idea for us to talk about if we want to have a time period between, like you said, it's 30 days for a hearing, but something similar for that.
Okay. Other questions?
I find it interesting that Downtown Lawrence, Inc. was consulted on this since it's way out of George Williams Way. I also don't see that Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods is on your list. Are they not on your list of folks to talk?
No, Lawrence Association Neighborhoods is not on our standard review. DLI is on the list because many of the events that are submitted do impact downtown. In this particular situation, DLI may have some feedback, they may not. When I took this process over from the city manager's office a year and a half ago, one of the things that I wanted to have happen was to get a core group of people that saw every application. And she just, Sally with DLI just happens to be one of those people, so that's why she got this one as well.
Sure. Other questions? Okay. Ryan? Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Hello, Commissioners. I'm Ryan Robinson with Silverback. Kind of as Mark said, I can kind of walk you through exactly what this event is. It's actually relatively simple. It kind of takes you back to your childhood. It literally is. It's a 1,000-foot water slide. We've done this, and I think we've done this in 10 cities so far this year. That's what we do. We're an event production company. We do about 225 events a year. Generally about, give or take, 200 cities a year is what we work with as well. We've worked with Mark on several different events throughout the years. I think we have a good track record here of putting on events. And really, we're just kind of here to educate, to work with the community, to figure out how we can make this work for the city of Lawrence.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan?
Well, one, Ryan, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about using the north side of George Williams Way. And I know, at least for myself, and the comments that I've heard in the last probably 96 hours have been pretty lengthy, and I would probably have to tell you at this point I would be supportive of moving the event to the north side, because I think it can be accommodating. I sit back and I try to think, okay, would this be a fun event in my neighborhood? Oh yeah, probably. But as sure as I just said that, I'm sure my neighbors are thinking, it may be kind of. But understand, it is a water slide, as you said. But I think we would be wise, based on all the information that we've received. One, to be able to help you be able to have your event, is to move it to obviously a less populated area that can handle this event. It's a long street. Talked to Casey this afternoon about potential parking at Rock Chalk Park. Casey, you said we had about 700 parking spaces that would be available. I think we're going to have to do some. I know the property owner at Mercado has concern about no parking on their property. Sorry
to interrupt you, Commissioner. That's one thing that I think probably needs to be cleared up real quick on the actual masses of people that are coming through this thing. It's 250 people per hour. So it's not it's not the Color Run. It's not a large event where you have 4,000 people there at one time. 250 people is probably what goes through McDonald's in an hour. Okay. So I think that's one thing with parking. Like we said, we've done this in 10 other cities. We just got back from doing it in downtown Dallas. I think we counted up that we needed about 100 spots is what we used in Dallas that ran through the.
Well, I do know, and I appreciate you clearing that up. 250, you got 250 coming and 250 going.
Sure.
So, there's probably 500 cars worth of people. So, but you got to have a space to be able to accommodate those kind of parking. Fortunate, to have the park there and the parking that is available to be able to do that. If it works at that location, it would be my suggestion, Mayor, and you can poll commissioners. But I know that we've all gotten the same information in the last 3 days. I think that would be a better site to be able to have this event.
And that obviously you got that information from me as an alternate site. On our side, that site is rock solid logistically. It's probably better logistically. But as far as really for me living in Lawrence, and also for what there's two sides of why people hire Silverback. There's the logistics side of things, and also the vision side of things, and knowing what happens with events. And on the vision side of it is, and for me, it's almost a personal thing with, I'm the father of 4 kids, and we spend all of our time rushing kids, putting them in the back of the minivan, hauling them around town, getting into a parking lot, parking in a stall, doing the event, hopping back in the car, driving home. That's how kids spend their childhoods these days. I look at it with, we live on campus, and come Halloween, we don't trick or treat in our neighborhood because, all we got is fraternities and sororities, and it's just not a good environment. So we actually drive out to West Lawrence, and we trick or treat out there, and it's amazing. There's thousands of kids walking around that neighborhood that are trick or treating, and it's funny. My parents live out there. And there's always a handful of houses out there that complain that kids are coming from different parts of town to come to the neighborhood and trick or treat. And I look at this as the same type of thing, is that it's a way to actually come to an event, be a part of a community, bring a community together, build some bonds, and actually have a good community event. So that's the side of it for the south side. That's why I push that. That's what we would like to have. If that doesn't, that's not what the neighborhood wants, and we will absolutely move to the north side. So that's just our 2 cents.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other questions?
We also check for the availability of a hydrant on the north side also. So I know that you need water.
Right.
Any other questions for Ryan? All right, thank you, Ryan. So before we open it up for public comment and people come up and tell us they don't want it south of 6th Street on George Williams, is there any commissioner that's objected to putting it on the north side? Is there any commissioner that wants it still on the south side? Okay. All right. So we didn't vote on that, but now you all know we're pretty much going to put it on the north side. So now we'll take some public comment on this item. Go ahead.
My name is Frank Jansen. As Mayor Emeritus Amick said, it's going to be a fun event. What's not mentioned, I don't know if this is to me it sounds like a free event. Is it a free event or is it going to cost money?
It's going to cost money.
Okay, could you please explain the price range and the age range and the size range for people using this particular event?
Well, it varies. There's 3 or 4 different.
I think it starts at like $8 and then moves up to, depending on the pass, but it's like $30 if you want to slide all day. But it starts at $8 for a couple of slides. So and that's the type of thing where most people are going to get purchase an $8 ticket. They're going to get a couple slides and then they're going to probably go home.
Age or size range?
Age or size range? I think you got to be like 42 inches tall and we hope to see Jeremy out there. So
I want to see Mike Anderson. I want him to get the all-day pass.
That's right.
Frank, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
Michael Kelly, and I live on Brynwood Court, which is about 2 blocks from the proposed site. And my parents are going to move into another property that I own on Coving Drive, which is immediately behind the south side proposed site. But since we've got this out of the way that we're looking at the north side now, I want to say a couple things. First of all, the city should support our local businesses, and Silverback is one of those. Number 2 is there wasn't much information about this that was detailed enough for people to decide if they liked it or not. That caused me to write a rather lengthy email. Mr. Robinson kindly took time to come back to me personally and answer point by point my concerns, except for one. So I'm going to confine my comments other than I'm saying, Mr. Robinson, thank you for answering my questions. I think that the porta potty, the crowd control, the parking, the drainage, I think they can all handle that. The issue I have has to do with the safety of the setup, operation, and tear down of this 1,000-foot inflatable structure. Mr. Robinson informed me that it comes on a semi-truck, it's not going to fly away. Taxpayers paid for 2 college degrees for me. Some of that included aeronautical engineering. I can assure you if the wind gets gusty enough and this thing isn't tied down properly, it will fly. You can look on the internet for Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which was 2,000 feet long, 39 feet wide, 8 feet thick, with asphalt deck on it, and it flew back in 1940. And it was a much stiffer and more robust structure than what we're talking about here. I looked on the website for safety limits for inflatable structures. I found one in Australia where it said 40 kilometers per hour absolutely shut it down. That's 25 miles an hour in our common units. So I would urge the city staff and Mr. Robinson to come to a very clear understanding about what sort of weather conditions are going to preclude the setup or delay the setup or suspend the operations or quit the operations. And make sure that that's all squared away so there's no misunderstanding. When you're talking about wind and lift, if you go from 10 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, it's the square of the velocity. So it's 4 times the lifting force if you double the wind. So it's a pretty serious thing if the wind comes up on these sorts of objects. I think it can be managed with proper engineering, proper tie downs, proper safety procedures, but I'd urge the city staff to make sure they consult carefully with Mr. Robinson and clarify all that ahead of time so there's no big problems. You may have seen a couple weeks ago, if you watched baseball, there was kind of a blooper where the Pittsburgh Pirates grounds crew was trying to put their tarp down, which is about 150 feet by 150 feet. It got away from them, and it literally swallowed one of their grounds crew. And he was very fortunate not to be seriously injured. And that was just a common thunderstorm and the wind blowing around the stadium. So these things can get loose. Last thing, north side of George Williams. The power poles are on the west side. The east side is clear. So if we got gusts from the west, which would be what we would expect in this part of the country, there's clear ground pretty much for several hundred yards to the east. That's a far better solution from a safety point of view, or far better safety buffer than having it somewhere else. It will not impact the power poles if it blows east, and that's good. So I'd urge the city staff to sit down with Mr. Robinson, get that safety stuff squared away, and if they can do that, I urge you to support it.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I think we should just have you hold it down. I think that would be a good... Any other public comments? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
As far as the safety side of that goes, I certainly will not get up here and debate engineering with Mr. Kelly. The only thing I will state is just our record. Over the past, since 2012, we've ran over almost close to 5 million people through our events, all safe, all sound. I mean, not that doesn't mean that something can't happen, but we do have a track record. We're talking 4.5 million people, so just want to put that out there.
That's Ryan. Ryan, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Does the slide, does it have, does it recirculate its own water?
It can, but we're not doing that here.
Okay, so it'll have continuous flow of water?
It'll have continuous flow, and mainly just so you don't deal with any hygiene issues is what that is.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Other public comment?
I just want to briefly say, I talked to some of you today. I called you earlier. Thank you for getting back to me. Appreciate it. But I appreciate...
Can we have your name, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Catherine DePaulis.
Thank you.
I appreciate you thinking about considering moving it or moving it to the north side. The thing I would like to say, and my concern, it's nothing to do with safety because I have no clue what you were talking about this. But was that the fact that the residents didn't get information on this. And it felt like it was a done deal when we get this 3 days ago telling us, here's this advertisement, come to this meeting where we're going to approve this. That's not okay in my book, because this is going to impact us, and it has nothing to do with kids coming into our neighborhood. I have a sister who lived on the west side and had many kids come to her neighborhood. It's not that we don't like kids and we don't want them in our neighborhood, but we needed to be a part of this so that we could get our concerns addressed and we could hear what was going to be done to address those concerns, not just sending us out a flyer. And as far as looking at closing the road as you would as in a construction process, this isn't a construction project. This is going to bringing in many people into this neighborhood. And if any of you know Langston Hughes Schools, elementary school, there is not enough parking for 250 people. I live there. Every time I drive by when there's an event at Langston Hughes, those cars are parked all up and down this neighborhood streets because there is not enough parking in that parking lot. So you cannot convince me that that would have worked. So just in the future, there needs to be a better process where our residents are informed of what's happening and they can voice their concerns and talk with it before it becomes down to something like this in our mailbox. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. DePaulis.
Well, Mike, I hope some of this has been addressed. James Frank. I live at 803 Coving, and a lot of my neighbors back up to George Williams Way. Due to the covenants in our homeowner association, we are not permitted to have fences, and I can see the problem already. People leaving the event, cutting right through all my neighbors' properties, and I can see a lot of problems that can result from that. So, that's one thing I'm concerned with for big-time safety, not only for the goers, but yet any kind of confrontations that could exist between a goer and a homeowner if the homeowner finally has enough of it. Okay, so that's a problem, that's a public safety issue. And the other thing that I really kind of put a hammer on it was this thing. This thing, when I first got it, that's the first sight I saw. You know where it went? I round filed it. This looked just like another thing that came in the mail that just people trying to advertise something. Didn't look at the other side. So this is kind of very misleading. I didn't appreciate the way this was put out to us. And like I say, I got this 3 days ago in the mail. So that's not very much notice for me. Okay. The other concern I have is basically the man hours that may have to be committed by the Lawrence Police Department. Okay. What happens when the people get calls because they have to respond to that when they could be responding to other major events in our city? Okay. I know I responded to I don't know how many thousands of calls when I worked on the LPD. So, just my point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Frank, and also for your service. Other public comment?
Eric Bodeker. I live in the Diamond Head neighborhood. Actually, Mr. Teal, I think, answered a lot of my concerns just a few minutes ago, but I would reiterate the comments that coming to this forum and quite frankly, taking up your guys' valuable time is not a good way to communicate. So having that information for the neighbors earlier would certainly be a lot better. After hearing Mark's comments, I actually don't have much of an issue with it being on the south side or the north side. I think my concerns are addressed, and certainly the neighbors in our neighborhood that I've talked to, I think would feel the same way. We would request that if we are still considering, and maybe that we've moved past that point, but if we are still considering the south side and those signs for restricting parking to one side of the street are enacted, that residents have some way of notifying whomever it might be for folks who aren't following those signs and making sure that we do keep one side of the street open and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bodeker. Other public comment? Hi.
I want to thank you all for allowing us to participate in this process. My name is Patricia Judd, and I live on Drum Drive, a property abutting George Williams Way into the back. I have a quick question. Most of my concerns have been addressed and certainly would be addressed by the Commission's decision to move to the north side of 6th Street. But I think this question may be for the gentleman from Silverback, or the city. Is there a mechanism set up whereby claims for property damage could be processed? How would those be handled? And then my second question is, apparently, given the closure until 11:59 p.m., there's going to be a night slide. I was reading on the Urban Slide website about sometimes there's a night slide and sometimes there isn't. Given that there are a lot of young children in the neighborhood, I wonder if there are any controls being put into place with regard to noise pollution and things like that. Again, that may be largely mitigated by the move to a less populated area, but I just wanted to mention that noise, if there's going to be music or something emitting from this, that's also a concern. And I don't know who might be best to address that.
We will get those addressed. Thank you, Ms. Judd. On the risk management side, property damage for claims, what is our standard process with that? Or is it?
It's not a city event.
Okay,
so
Ryan, can you address that?
That would be a Silverback issue.
Yeah, we would do the same as we do. We have a full, umbrella insurance policy, and we would just take all claims through us.
So if someone has a claim, they contact Silverback.
Exactly.
Okay. And then on the second issue on, obviously if it's moved to the north side, there's probably not going to be an issue with noise.
Sure, I think we would just follow the same noise ordinance that follow the rest of the city. That's what we would do. I don't know what the time is for what time. Does anybody know what time for the ordinance?
Scott, the noise ordinance?
Look it up.
Okay.
Sure.
We'll check on that for you, Mr.
Yeah, just so everybody's, noise is really not part of the attraction of this event.
Is what can we expect as far as, I mean, obviously there's people and they're going to make noise, right? But is there music playing?
There is music
lights
playing.
and things like that?
I mean,
So there's
like you'd have for a neighborhood barbecue type thing, like a speaker of that size.
Okay. All right. I'm just trying to get an idea of what to expect.
Absolutely.
Again, if it's north of 6, that's probably less of a problem for the folks who are right.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.
Is there sliding at night?
Is there what now?
Is there going to be
There's
sliding
slides
at night?
up until 10 p.m. on Saturday night. And then what time do we close down on Sunday? At 6. They close down at 6 p.m. on Sunday.
Okay. Thank you. Other public comment? All right. We'll bring it back to the commission. I think there's consensus to move it to the north side. I agree with your comments on having a more standardized policy. And Mark, can you address the? I see the postcard was dated the 14th. Why would people have gotten it 3 days ago?
Brian can probably answer more of that than I can. We prepare the notice that the minimum amount of notice that the city require for the recipients to receive in terms of what is going to happen, what the event is, and what's going to happen with the event, and when you all are going to decide the event or decide to issue the permit or not. In this particular case, we sent that to Silverback. They processed it through whatever process they used to do a mailing. They asked me if they could add additional information to that, and I said yes, you could do that. And that's the postcard that you saw that a couple of the property owners brought up and showed you.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess I probably couldn't speak on why it would be posted the 14th and then why somebody would state that if they got it 3 days ago. So.
Okay. Probably just a process issue. Okay, thank you. So what would probably be good is we can have the discussion tonight, but I don't know about you, but I'm sure you're looking forward to a shorter meeting. So we could put this on a future agenda to have a process, talk about a process for events and who we notify and that sort of thing and a time frame, and I think that might be the best thing to do. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I'd like to look at the list of folks who are on the standard.
Okay. So maybe could we have a memo prepared on what the process is currently, and we'll put that on a future agenda to have a conversation about. And then in relationship to, I mean, I would assume, Ryan, you're going to be working with city staff to make sure it's going to be safe. I mean, that's, so I don't think we need to necessarily do anything with that. I apologize to folks that this kind of was sprung on you, and appreciate all the comments and the phone calls. I spent the better part of my afternoon on the phone, and I know a lot of other commissioners did too. So thanks so much for giving us your feedback. Unless there's any other commission discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the street event temporary use right-of-way permit allowing for the closure of George Williams Way from north of 6th Street to Rock Chalk Park Drive from 12 a.m. on Saturday, August 8th to 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, August 9th for the urban water slide.
Mayor, I'll make that motion as long as we can add that we have no parking on the west side of the street and other sites, appropriate by, as approved by staff, where need additional signing there for no parking. You say that we don't want to talk about whatever the structural thing is, or have staff look at that, or they just are. The stuff Mr. Kelly brought up.
Well, I mean, the safety stuff, we certainly could have staff look at that.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think, can we just consult together to make sure that things are
that's fine,
are safe and on the up? It's
the
something
thing that I think about
anyway,
is there's a fair going on right now, and some tells me that they've got one of those things that you climb in and bounce around in, and I doubt there was a whole bunch of looking at that. So that's probably
depending on your action on moving it to the north side of 6th Street, first thing tomorrow morning, that revision would go out to that group, PD, fire medical, transit, and others. We would send that back to another review process. Even though it's been approved, we would ask them to provide that. Staff will have to look at what's appropriate to have open and closed. My understanding is that they will be south of Overland Drive so that vehicles will be able to, is that correct? So the closure will be south of Overland Drive, north of 6th Street. So you can come through Stone Ridge and come through that neighborhood to get to Rock Chalk Park. Also, as far as parking, the event is held on the east side of George Williams Way. There will be one lane northbound and one lane southbound for traffic to access Rock Chalk Park and the KU facilities. We also, kind of with the idea that this may come up tonight for the other option B, I contacted Frank Masterson with KU. He's the Associate Athletic Director responsible for that complex out there. He was fine with the event being located on the north side of 6th Street in that area. We've also met with the Parks and Rec folks, and they don't have any events scheduled other than the normal round of people. And I think Ernie Shaw with Parks and Rec told me they expect to have about 600 on an average weekend pass through that facility. So in addition to that, we would also look at where they can't park. Obviously, we don't want them to park in the overflow parking area, as well as the neighborhood, which is Oregon Trail addition to the east of George Williams Way. We would post that similarly how we were going to post the neighborhood east of George Williams Way. On the other side, no parking on one side of the street. So I think there'll be the standard city review to make sure that all the safety elements with no parking and fire medical egress and when they look at just one more thing and I'll sit down. When fire medical reviews event permits, whether it's a tent or a slip and slide, they apply the building safety codes to those events, and they send us a list of requirements that there be fire extinguishers, and we attach those. We did get that list from Fire Medical for the event, which would be the same on either side of 6th Street. So those requirements will still apply, I'm sure. But Jim King with Fire Medical will have an opportunity to do another cursory review with this new location.
Okay. Good.
You know, I'm really glad that we're able to come to an agreement with the neighborhood, something that's a compromise and can make this work really well. But I just want to take a minute as kind of a side issue. And, Ryan, I appreciate you setting up shop in Lawrence. I know that your business does these types of events in hundreds of cities across the United States, and it's really neat that we can have you here in town. And he's a pretty humble guy, doesn't talk a lot about what his business does, but it's worth noting just for the record that a lot of the events that your business puts on, large amounts of money are being donated to organizations that support the community. I know I spoke to Heather Hoy at the Arts Center last night. We were talking about Free State Fest, and she was talking about how, trying to facilitate a George Clinton concert and everything else in downtown Lawrence. And we weren't even talking about the water slide deal. And she said, if it weren't for Silverback dropping off all the barricades, dropped off thousands of dollars of barricades, asked nothing for it, just dropped them off. And so I just want to take a minute to appreciate what your business does. I know it doesn't get a lot of press. I know, my wife has lived in this town her whole life, had no idea what Silverback was. And so you guys don't get a lot of press, but you do a lot of cool things outside of Lawrence. And to me, it's just really neat that you're here. And so I hope this event goes well for you, and I hope that you stick around and stay here.
Sure. If I could just speak real quick, and mainly just because I know that you guys are going to, sounds like you're going to reconvene on starting up an event process. And I just offer us up. For one, Mark is absolutely amazing to work with. Obviously we work with hundreds of people across the country. I was talking to Mark on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. And he really is, he's a credit to the city of Lawrence. The one thing I will say is that the process that we have here is very rare compared to what we deal with in every other city that we work with. So I think that there definitely is some strides we can make on streamlining that process, making it more transparent for everybody to work through. I guess we just offer that up. and then I think that actually we could get better events that would come here. This event, it's great from a logistics side. From an inspiration side, it's pretty low on the inspired side of things. I'm sure our client would hate it, but I would, it's Schlitterbahn. So that's the thing that I think that once we get through that process, we can actually start bringing really cool stuff here. And we have stuff that flows through our desk every single day from all parts of the country that we can bring here, but we can't do it until we get some sort of process in place.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. So we've got a motion on the floor to approve by Commissioner Amix, second by Commissioner Herbert. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. All right. Item number 11, Commissioner Herbert.
Give people a second to file out. I had on number 11, I had a real quick question probably for Scott. I think he'd be the best one to take this. If I were just a random citizen business owner and I called you and asked why this ordinance prohibited me from placing signage in my parking lot, what would the justification be from the city?
Well, our sign code is the culmination of a lot of citizen and board input and city commission decisions over the years, and so it's just an outcome of all those discussions about aesthetics and scope of signs and things. And they're just like any sign code, there's a point there, a level, a balancing level of what's allowed and what's not.
Okay. Mayor Farmer, the reason I asked for this to be pulled off the consent agenda, I have no reason to deny the city the right to do that. I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but where my concern lies is that I have a real difficult time creating a double standard where we say it's not okay at all for businesses to do this, but when the city wants to do it, it's perfectly acceptable. So my proposal would be, and we can deal with this tonight, we can deal with this later. If the ordinance isn't there for a safety reason or isn't there for a reason that we can really point to and say it has to be there, if it's so malleable that on any given Tuesday we can say, let's let Rock Chalk Park do it, not a big deal, I would propose that perhaps the ordinance doesn't need to exist. I have no reason to deny the city the right to do this, but if we're going to allow the city government to violate the sign code, perhaps we should allow city businesses, private businesses, to violate it as well.
I might speak to that. Commissioner Herbert, the sign code categorizes different types of uses and different types of signs. And so this actually wouldn't be just for the city. This would be applied to any government entity that would look to do this. The GPI district is general public and institutional use. So USD sites are zoned that way. Most city sites, the fairgrounds, for example. So part of the response to your concern is that in our broader effort to look at the sign code, we would address some of these issues that you're talking about, the equity issues and that kind of thing.
Okay.
But
yep, I just want to make sure that citizens are given the same rights that governments are given.
So what is the example that we're doing at Rock Chalk Park?
Well, the Parks and Rec Department is working on gaining a sponsor to sponsor the Sports Pavilion Lawrence property.
The entire property?
The entire property. Just not the KU property, but the city lot, which is the rec center and parking area. And part of what's pretty typical, I think, is for sponsors to have signs. And part of their desire is to have banners on the parking poles and signs on the and this will all come to you eventually when it's all worked out. But one of the things that we've identified early on is, in talking to Parks and Rec, is that our sign code doesn't accommodate their desire. And they wanted to know pretty early on whether or not their desire could be accommodated from the sponsor's perspective. of any sponsor's perspective of whether or not of whether they can, whether that important value to them could be accommodated by the city sign code. So that's what brought us to this, is quite a bit more urgent than our general look at the sign code, which this commission has directed me to not work on very much until we get some other things addressed. But so that's the impetus for this particular amendment.
So does this mean that the outside of the rec center could have like a big Sprint banner, Verizon banner? Is that...
It would have a sponsor sign on, so instead of Sports Pavilion Lawrence, it would be sponsor Sports Pavilion Lawrence. And then there would be banners, either single or double banners on the, hung mid-level on the parking pole.
Are those similar to like downtown?
Kind of like what we have on the streets across the bridge, yes, sir.
So these would be up all
downtown.
of the time? These would be permanent signs?
My understanding is that they could be permanent signs, correct.
I'm not excited about that.
Now, and this just initiates the amendment process. This amendment then would be placed on an August Sign Code Board of Appeals for review and recommendation and public comment, and then would come to the City Commission for decision.
I mean, I'm not opposed to the sponsorship. I think sponsorship is a good way to pay for things that, frankly, taxpayers don't want to pay for, right? I mean, if we could pay for the
taxpayers already paid for Sports Pavilion Lawrence. They're paying for a long time.
If we could make the T more efficient by sticking a pizza shuttle sign on the side of it, I'll paint it myself. But yeah, so my concern is not so much denying Sports Pavilion the right to hang these signs as making sure that private businesses have the right to hang sponsorship signs in their parking lot too, if that's their desire. I don't know particularly why they might desire to do that, but if it's a mechanism the city has to go around the code, I'd like to make sure that business owners have the same right.
I'm not excited about corporate sponsorship of public facilities with big signs saying so, especially.
Better than raising property taxes and sales taxes.
That's true.
I think.
Well, tonight we're just authorizing staff to initiate the text amendments. It sounds like there'll be opportunity for public comment, Sign Code Board of Appeals, and then it'll come back to the City Commission.
Yes, sir.
At some point in September.
Probably late August, early September.
Okay. So we'll have an opportunity to weigh in on the matter again?
Yes.
Okay. So is there public comment on this item? Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to authorize staff to... Okay.
I'd just like to also say that there's something wrong, like there's a dead zone for sound back there, and the first time I asked, I didn't get any answers. And Commissioner Amix, I think they turned up the volume, but something is up with your microphone. So when you talk, it's very difficult to hear you.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. As far as this, I mean, I really can't say how much I agree with Commissioner Sutton. In some of these sports arenas and so forth that you see, the sponsorship changes so quickly because there's mergers or things go out of business and so forth and so on, and you'll be going to the Busch Stadium or this and that, and just making up names. Also, sometimes it's like, even like when you're watching a sports event on TV, you can hardly see, or at KU or whatever, you can hardly see the action. It's very distracting in there. And I remember a time that some of you young folks might not remember when the KU chose to put up that big brick sign with the, what is that, at Iowa and would that be buildings? The corner. It has a big brick thing with the...
Talking about the Lead Center sign?
Yeah, it's the Lead Center sign, if you want to call it that. Yeah, and the city really didn't want them to do it. But I guess we aren't allowed to make rules about things on their property. That's my recollection of it. And that was a really big deal. at that time. And I find it distracting driving down. What am I supposed to do? Be driving and read that, read that thing? And I thought it was an affront, from KU to the city. And so, I mean, who wants something that the city has paid for, referred to as the X, center or something like that? We've had times where there have been buildings wrapped with banners that I'm not clear about how they were allowed to do that or if they had to have special permission, but people do not go around town even inspecting the signs that aren't supposed to be up. Like, people are always putting up signs, sticking up signs at prominent intersections, whether they be for politicians or their services or whatever, and I find that very distracting. And even when there's no enforcement, if you get enforcement, it's a weekday, Monday through Friday thing, the same as will happen with your water event. The offices are closed. So I'm just saying, I agree with that, and I think we can go too far with this, and we have signs all over as it is that should not be there, and it'd be nice to direct some attention to removing those inappropriate signs as it is. And I would really hate to see this become a branded arena or anything. I mean, I'm not clear on what you say about private people being able to put up signs, but there are rules about that too. At one time there was a rule, and I don't know if they took it away, that if you were a tenant, you weren't allowed to put up a political sign for somebody's campaign. Only the landlord could choose to put up their own sign on your space that you were renting, making you appear to be a supporter of candidate Y when in fact you were a supporter of candidate X. I don't know if that just went down the tubes and went away, but that was how things were. And I found that very offensive. Also, there's a size thing on signs, and I find that to be either pushed to limit or exceeded as well, and they block your view. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair.
And I appreciate it if we could hear the comments, and I couldn't hear responses to my first inquiry.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Scott, would this allow KU to have corporate signs, or are they allowed to do that now?
On the campus, our sign code, as I understand it, is not applied to KU on the UKU zone, and basically on East and West campus.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Rock Chalk Park is governed by our local zoning codes and sign codes, so this could be applied there as well.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, I would entertain a motion to authorize staff to initiate text amendments in the Sign Code, Chapter 5, Article 18 of the City Code to accommodate corporate sponsorship of public facilities within GPI zone districts.
So moved.
Is there a second? I will second the motion. Motion made and seconded to approve by Commissioner Amick, seconded by Mayor Farmer. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion fails 2-3 with Commissioners Herbert Foley and Vice Mayor Soden in the negative. All right. Now we move on to the City Manager's report.
I don't have a report for you this evening.
Because Casey's in charge.
That's right. All right. Next, we'll move on to public comment of a general nature, and I want to say if you've got a comment that's not in relationship to anything on the regular agenda, we would welcome your public comment tonight. It's vitally important to each of us and to the process Part of what our responsibilities are is to ensure that everyone gets a fair hearing and the work of the commission gets done. We're not using a shot clock per se, but we will provide you with a reasonable opportunity to state your views, and if it's taking a bit too long, I'll ask you to wrap it up, and we'll ask you to yield the floor and provide the balance of your comments in writing, which will be entered into the record. So we'll open it up for public comment at this time.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. My name is Justine Burton, and I'm here this evening to appeal for recognition for Mr. Ray Samuels for his 34 years of service to the community of Lawrence as the Director in Human Relations Commission. These were turbulent times in the early 70s, and Mr. Samuels dealt with housing discrimination, employment, racial unrest, and local businesses that discriminated against minorities. From my understanding, local human relation groups also had, Mr. Samuel was known as the Dean of Civil and Human Rights in Kansas. During his time, there was a lot going on, and Mr. Samuel stayed in the middle of everything. And he was a fair but stern person. He served the city of Lawrence as the agency director until he retired in 2007, which made him one of the longest serving department heads in the history of Lawrence city government. I feel that Mr. Samuel's contributions to Lawrence and the influence he had in shaping how racial issues were resolved in our community should receive some type of recognition for his service. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. What a great man he is. Other public comments?
Well, I hadn't planned to have this invitation, but I will say that I find it extremely difficult and inexplicable that we are so far behind in our written minutes of our meetings. And I have talked to staff about it, and I talked today about it. Didn't get my other stuff written time to submit because I was so busy trying to find out about, try and track things down. If you weren't at the meeting, even if you were at the meeting, you didn't hear the exact nature of the motion. We are like 3 months behind. And I suggested today to, I don't know him by, oh yeah, there you are, Brandon. If we can't do it, if we can't catch up, because I guess we caught up by adding a few weeks ago, if we can't catch up, that we ought to explore since there isn't anything of a sensitive nature in the public part of the meeting, if there were a good quality transcription service. I'm not talking about computerized like Dragon stuff. The hospital uses that and makes terrible mistakes. But, that we catch up, because it's extremely difficult to look at items that have been before the commission and try and follow, even when you attended. So I wouldn't have planned to speak about this. I also don't know sometimes when to send something in, because if it isn't on the agenda, then I don't know if it's appropriate to send it in and have it posted. And I really also hope that you'll consider moving the meetings back to the time they used to be. It's still a very difficult time. When I commuted, I could never have made these meetings. I'm sure it wouldn't have broken your hearts, but and even to post the agenda, I don't really even see a reason for posting the agenda at the end of the day Thursday. It gives the public very little chance to send in written comments, and yet staff and so forth can add something at the very last minute And, so those are some just general suggestions and complaints that I had about system that I didn't know how to present, and I have now done so.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair.
Thank you.
Other public comment? All right, we will move on to the regular agenda. The first item to consider following items related to East 9th project has been deferred until next week, so we'll move on to the second item where the city auditor will present the performance audit for financial indicators. Hi, Michael.
Good evening. Mike Iglinski, I'm the city auditor. I'm going to be presenting this report tonight, which is I call a financial indicators report. I've been doing it pretty much every year. So I do this for really a couple of reasons. One is it's a way of kind of keeping an eye out for any emerging or existing financial problems. It's a way of putting some of the city's finance into context, looking at some benchmarks and trends over about 10 years. And I have in here a bullet point of it's to encourage discussion. That's sort of a code for it always brings up questions that are new and that I can't necessarily answer. So feel free to ask questions, but I may not always have the answer for them. What I was going to do is walk through just some of the highlights of the report. It's really a kind of an informational report, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I'll touch on some of the highlights. The first things are about government activities. By government activities, we mean basically everything that the city does except for the enterprise funds. So it's all the typical things you think of as city government. And one of the indicators I look at is called financial position. This is sort of a big picture measure of the organization's ability to maintain providing services. The graphs that I use throughout most of the report show the data for Lawrence as these green bars going back to 10 years. That blue bar on the far right is a benchmark. Most of the benchmarks are based on a comparison of median of a group of about 15 college towns. And then the black line is a kind of smooth trend line to sort of help you see if there's a trend. In this case, this is a very good indicator. We're well above the benchmark, and that's good. The number is fairly steady over time, so that's good. This is, I think, a really noteworthy good indicator. This indicator isn't necessarily good or bad, but this is the long-term liability, so it's really the debt burden. And a couple things you'll notice here. We are now above the benchmark, so we have a little bit more debt than the median of the communities I have. And this changed quite a bit in 2014. For a lot of these indicators, a change that you haven't planned or aren't aware of is real concern. But we knew this was coming. This is debt related to several really major projects like the library and the recreation center.
Hey, Michael. I have a quick question.
Sure.
That I'll forget about by the time you get to do it. That debt, you know how Brian Kidney talks about how he'll issue temporary notes, and then actually after a year or so he'll do the bonds. Yep. I'm still learning about that. Does that number have to do with any of those temporary notes, or are those the actual bonds?
This is the actual long-term bonds.
Okay, thank you.
But that's actually a great question.
Thank you.
And it will come up later in my presentation.
Michael, also,
yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you, but we just borrowed a lot of money on the enterprise side, going from short-term notes to long-term bonds.
Yes.
Have we issued government activities bonds in a significant amount in 2015? Maybe somebody else.
Brian?
I mean, is this going to go up again next year?
Yes. I think.
But this is not the enterprise, so we're talking about government activities bonds.
Correct. Yeah, we have some short-term governmental bonds or temporary notes that will be taken out.
Okay, so this is going to continue to go up.
The ratio, I'm not sure exact dollar-to-dollar ratio, but the liabilities have been going up. I'm not sure of the operation.
Another thing that's in these long-term liabilities are what I've called employee-related long-term liabilities. So they're things like the retiree health care obligations and the accrued vacation and sick leave. Those are actually a fairly significant chunk of this. They're not 50% or anything like that. But they are also a growing area. And one of the things, it's not shown in these tables, but one of the changes that's going to happen for our next year's financial statements is we're going to have to show the pension obligations on our financial statements. So those are actually financial commitments that we have and that we have now, but they're not showing up in our financials. They're going to show up beginning next year. And there's sort of, the idea is it'll give a little more kind of transparency and information, make it a little easier to look at different cities and see how the pensions are.
So will you adjust the previous years to reflect the previous liabilities we incurred, or is it just going to show up as a completely new thing?
I don't plan to go back and adjust 10 years of data for the accounting change, and I don't think the accounting rules would require that the data be done that way, so there won't be a source of that going back 10 years.
So your chart will show a big increase that's...
I don't think it's going to show up as a long-term liability on the... I guess this is sort of a little bit of a technical accounting question, and I can't answer that at this point, but I can take a look, and I'll answer it next
how
year.
we're going to account for, but
let's just move on.
And just to recall, it's our share of the capers. Basically, is the amount that's going to have to be shown on that.
And this is something that every government is facing. It's a change in the rules, and it comes into effect. There are always a little bits of uncertainty about how it's going to look now.
It's not a new liability. It's just recognition of the liability.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yep. And so I just wanted to give you, mainly what I want to do is give you guys a heads up so that when this shows up next year, you'll think, wait a minute, that rings a bell, and it doesn't feel like a surprise. This indicator is another one that is fairly positive. This shows kind of the aging of our capital assets, so infrastructure, buildings, vehicles. And on the government side, you'll see that this number higher is better on here, and we're above the median. There was a little bit of a jump up. That reflects that we've added some really big buildings. So we've added the library and the recreation center. So all things being equal, that's relatively good news. Although it comes with increasing maintenance costs. So on the business activity side, and the business activity is mainly water and sewer utility. That's by far the biggest part. Then the solid waste system is second, and then there are smaller ones that are really quite inconsequential for the overall picture. So I have a measure here that I call financial performance. It tells you something about how resources are growing. I thought this graph was kind of interesting because there's sort of an interesting up and down. You'll see a couple of years ago we had sort of good performance. We've had years that are below that median. There's been a little bit of a trend down. So I did a little bit of extra analysis to just see if I could understand this. And really it comes down to the amount of water that we sell. So in 2012, when we put in new landscaping at my house, and then we had just a blazing hot, dry summer. So I was out there every night after work watering the lawn, or Mary was on her weeks watering the lawn, and we were really driving this indicator up by doing that. The last couple years haven't been nearly as dry, and so we haven't sold as much water. And I think looking at 2015, so far, we're not selling probably a lot of water. People aren't watering their lawns enough. So this measure is going to go down again a little bit, I would expect.
I think the urban slide might help with that, though.
But if they sell enough water, yeah. So this indicator is called general support, and this is a measure of whether your business activities, your enterprise operations, are requiring tax funds to provide the services, or whether they're actually providing some transfers to support government activities. When the graph is below, what that means is that the enterprise operations are shifting some of their resources over to the government side to provide some support. In this indicator, there's not really a right or a wrong level. What you want to look at are changes, and if there's a significant change. We made a change back in about 2007 and 2008 where we increased the amount that we transferred from the utilities, primarily utilities, into the general fund. And there's a policy about that now, and it's sort of known and transparent. So don't really have much to say about that. So liquidity, and this is where we come back to the temporary notes. Liquidity is a measure of sort of how much sort of quickly convertible resources you have to meet kind of immediate needs or unexpected needs. And on the enterprise operations side, that number is low. It's gone down, and it's below our benchmark. Largely what is driving that is that we have the temporary notes. So those are basically monies that will be converted into long-term debt, but that weren't yet in 2014. And that has an effect of making the liquidity a little tighter. We would expect that it will go up a little bit next year when we convert those into long-term debt. But what that will do is when we convert it to long-term debt, it will raise our debt, so our debt will go up a little. These two graphs are pretty much exactly what the general government side looked like last year, and you'll see that change. Again, I think what's really important in these kind of things is not just the level, but the changes, and you particularly want to be concerned if there's a change that happens that we didn't know. So if debt goes up and we're like, whoa, where did that come from? Then we need to worry. But we know that that's going to happen, and it's a sort of planned activity thing. So I do some more. I have lots of graphs and numbers in this, and I do some on funds, governmental funds, and I do two adjustments to these numbers. I look at 10 years, I adjust for the inflation, and I adjust for the number of people in the city. So these numbers will be in the dollars per resident, and they're adjusted for inflation, so they should be comparable over the whole 10 years. So first I looked at debt, and that is the pattern that you expect and that we've seen in the other ones. Then I looked at revenue, and revenue has been sort of gradually but slowly increasing over the 10-year period. You see a big bump in 2010. That is when we acquired farmland property, and there was some money that came with that to provide for the cleanup, environmental cleanup there. Expenditures is a little bit kind of lumpier than revenues, but is generally kind of gradually going up over time. So the last section I have are indicators of, I guess I'd say, the community's environment. Up until this point, everything I've talked about has been what the city is doing and spending. These last indicators they really are the environment. They're almost like the weather. They're what's the economy doing a bit. And they're really high level. They're not detailed, but they're really just high level indicators. And so the first one is jobs. And jobs has, it doesn't show up great in this image, but that 2014 is a little bump up, and I think that's positive. Over the last 10 years, there hasn't really been a lot of job growth. Assessed value is somewhat similar. There's a little bit of a bump in the last year, 2014. It was flat. It was growing basically until we hit the big housing bubble and recession, and then it was flat. And when I look at other communities, there's both of the income, or not the income, the assessed value and the employment numbers, you see a real dip with the recession, that we were fortunate to have less of a dip than many communities. So maybe that's, whatever. And then finally, I looked at taxable retail sales. So that's a measure of the kind of the sales going on, retail that's going on in the economy. And again, that's pretty similar in that it's largely flat. It's been growing and improving a little bit kind of in the last few years. And you see a dip related to, I think, the recession, although it's maybe a year later than really the recession first hit. One of the things those graphs don't show, I look at 10 years, and if I looked at 20 years, you would see something really different. And that is the 10 years before the 10-year period I looked at, both employment and assessed value were growing really quickly, and that has sort of flattened out a bit. I didn't look at taxable sales. I'm not sure I had the data, but probably it was somewhat similar. Finally, I'd like to point out that the report is available online, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Michael? Great report.
Clearly a man that enjoys his job.
Yeah, Michael, I think you touched on your report the 5-year CIP recommendation. You want to tell us about that, please?
So several years ago, I had this report. I had recommendations about preparing some forward-looking financial information. This is all looking backward, what happened in the past. And I made recommendations that the city do 5-year capital improvement planning and a 5-year or multi-year financial forecast. We're making steps in that direction, I would say. You're getting more information looking out those 5 years. And I'm keeping an eye on that. That'll show up in the follow-up report. I think the forecasts are going 2 years out, maybe, budget year, and then maybe the year beyond it.
And this information that you're presenting comes from our financial statements,
yes,
which include all of our funds.
Yes.
Some of our funds are budgeted, and some are not budgeted. So there's a lot that's going on with our finances that actually is not in our budget. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there are funds that are not budgeted.
In the context of the multi-year projections, I'll put it that way. Are we talking about just budgeted funds for multi-year projection, or are we talking about all funds?
So I think that my recommendations weren't that specific about what the projection should be. What I would say I see typically in other communities that do these projections are they project the major funds, both the revenue and the expenditure side. So they will project the property tax revenue, sales tax revenues, maybe some of the other like user fee revenues. But they wouldn't go into great detail necessarily. And the same thing on the expenditure side of focus on the really big things. And really what you're looking for is just the picture of how do we expect things to be growing over the next 5 years, and is it is it reasonable to expect that our revenue growth is going to be enough to cover the expenditures?
So. And it would also be looking out in the future as to what we might be doing with our borrowing, which is the CIP.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Can you also talk a little bit about the debt issuance guidelines that you've talked about?
Yeah, so the City Commission a few years ago adopted a set of debt issuance guidelines, and those are just some ratios and calculations that you guys get, I think, typically whenever we issue debt. I have a recommendation in here, actually, because the guidelines that the Commission adopted just didn't get transferred into the budget book. And so the recommendation here is just to update the page in the budget book. It's really almost a...
And you're available to explain the debt issuance guidelines to us.
I don't remember what they are.
They're now in the budget book.
They're now in the budget book.
And Ryan can explain them.
Yeah. Basically, the idea is that when debt gets issued, to bring back to you all some measures that you can just keep a look on, so that you don't get surprised by some change.
A lot of us are new, and we need to learn this stuff. So.
And I think probably there's room for different measures and maybe more simple, maybe more complicated, I don't know.
Well, along with that, Stuart, one of the things that I can say is that it's important when you read Diane's letter in response to your recommendation is that the recommendation that this body reviews, those guidelines periodically, and I think that's extremely important. So there is that understanding that, one, they exist, and number two, we're on top of those debt issuances. So.
Right. Yeah, and sort of setting those limits is a kind of a policy discussion about where we feel comfortable with. So.
Michael, great work. Thank you so much.
Michael, I have a question outside of this, though. What projects are you working on, and when do we get to talk to you about new ones?
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to close this thing so we can go back to the agenda. So you'll get a report in the next month, I believe. I have got a report on protecting personally identifiable information, and I received management's response to that. So basically there's a little bit of formatting, and then that will go on the agenda. I want work with Diane about when she'd like that to be released. Last week you guys asked me to do some work looking at the Lawrence Community Shelter. My intent is to start that, not just looking at background, but actually start that next. And then sometime probably in August come back with a proposal for additional projects. If that sort of, so my priority that I was thinking is I would begin to work on the community shelter project and then bring back direction for future projects. If you guys want something else, just let me know.
Sounds good. One other question. Yep. Michael, not for you. Brian, does Michael's report bring any red flags that we should be looking at?
Well, we're definitely on the same page.
That's what I want to hear.
Bringing debt policy back to you. One thing that's in the debt policy is we do have a lot of indicators in there that I'm not sure that really. In my belief, going back and look at it, they may have just been indicators to put indicators into the policy to have something. So what we're bringing forward next, or what my plan is to bring something, I think we've talked about it, is something a little bit more, where does the city want to be at kind of more of a big picture of, this is where we'd like to see ourselves in relation to other median cities and things, and have the debt guidelines get us there instead of just having a bunch of just ratios. Because every time you have a ratio in there, then say a big project comes up, then all of a sudden, what I found in communities, they go back and they change the ratios just because it doesn't fit what they want to do. So my idea is to bring forward a debt policy that kind of talks about here's where we want to be in 5 years as we relate us in our debt, everything. So looked at that. I think the other thing to look at, first couple slides, I think definitely showed that we do have high liabilities, but we do have high assets. I think if we're comparing to these other communities, I think, in my feeling going and looking at our peer communities that he's judging on, is that we have really well taken care of assets in the city, and we've been paying for them, and we're going to continue to pay the debt on them. But our net value of our community, I think, shows pretty much a little bit higher than our peer communities. So that was one thing that I kind of took away from that. But no major red flags at all.
Well, one of the most important comments you made is the fact that staff and the auditor are on the same page. So that's.
Yeah, for now.
That's good.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah.
When I went down and we talked about it, I don't think there was anything there that surprised Brian.
No.
And that's a good thing. I guess I would be troubled if I showed him something and he said, "Whoa, where'd that come from?" There was nothing like that. So, but that is a lot of these things. It's a sudden, unexpected, or unanticipated change that is what you would be concerned about. Okay. So, I characterize this sometimes as like a doctor's checkup. They test your blood pressure what they're looking for is a change that they didn't expect. It's a little bit like that. So once a year we look at this.
One other question for Brian. How's our liquidity doing? It looked like it was kind of down there at the end of 2014. We're doing okay?
Well, I think as he talked about, that was again, his graphs, he's showing ratios, not necessarily pure liquidity. So I think that liquidity, correct me if I'm wrong, liquidity is current assets divided by current liabilities. And that was on the business part of things. We have issued that large temporary note that we had, and liquidity-wise in the enterprise funds is we have a lot of cash because we're starting to really get into the construction phases right now. So I think you'll see that graph quite a bit different at the end of this year.
The questions or comments?
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Public comment on this issue? All right. And I would entertain a motion to receive the financial indicators performance audit report from the city auditor.
Moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded to receive the report by Commissioners Amix and Boley. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Michael, great job. Thank you. Last item on the regular agenda is to receive the presentation of the 2015 Citizen Survey.
We have Jason from ETC here to present.
All right. Good evening, Jason.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate your patience.
Oh, no problem. Let me just
It's never fun to get put at the end of the agenda.
it happens sometimes. It's okay. Let me just make sure I can find the right one here.
Saving the best news for last.
That's right. That's right. Okay, my name is Jason Morato, project manager at ETC Institute. And we're a marketing research firm based in Olathe. We provide a lot of different types of marketing research services, but the thing we really specialize in is doing community surveys for local government organizations. So today I'm going to go through the results of the citizen survey we administered this past spring for the city. Let's see, how do I click to the next slide here? You should check this. I should have checked it before I started. Is that doing it? No. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Page. Yeah. There it is. That works. That works. Sorry. Okay, so ETC Institute, we're based in Olathe, but we're a national leader in market research for local government organizations. Since 2006, we've surveyed over 2 million people in 700 cities and 49 states. So this really is the type of thing that we specialize in. Tonight I'm going to start off going through the survey purpose and methodology, then bottom line up front, which is a quick overview of our takeaway of the survey results. Then I'll go through some major survey findings, summary conclusions, then any questions if there are any. And if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and stop me so you don't forget what you're going to ask at the end. So there's several reasons to do a survey like this. One is to objectively assess how satisfied citizens are with major city services. And there's really two levels to this. On the first question on the survey, we asked residents how satisfied they are with major categories of city services. Then later on in the survey, we asked them to rate their satisfaction with some more specific areas within a lot of those services. This is the third time we administered a citizen survey for the city. So the other purpose of this survey is to measure trends from the first survey we did in 2007, then also the one we did in 2011. And we asked a lot of the same questions, so that we're able to do that. The other thing we're going to do with this survey is we're able to compare the city's performance with other communities, both on a regional and a national basis. And we'll look at that more closely in a little bit. And then the survey is also a great way to help to determine priorities for the community. So this was a 7-page survey, which is a typical length for our citizen surveys. Most of them are 6 to 7 pages. And as I mentioned, it included a lot of the same questions that we asked on the previous survey so we can measure those trends. The survey was administered by a combination of mail, phone, and online. And the surveys take about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. So it's a little bit of a long survey, but it covers a lot of topics and provides a lot of information. Our goal was to get at least 800 completed surveys. We actually ended up with over 1,300, so we had a really, really good response rate. We had a very similar response rate the other times we did the survey as well, so it's not unexpected, but still it's a much better response rate than we typically get. So the results of these 1,300 plus surveys at the 95% level of confidence have a margin of error plus or minus 2.7%. So essentially what that means is if we did this survey 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 2.7% from what we're reporting. So there's always some margin of error when you're doing surveys, but overall these results are very, very accurate. So here's the map of the city, and the red dots are households that completed the survey. So you see we had a really good representation throughout the city. So bottom line up front, before we get into some of the more details, we found that residents have a positive perception of the city. And a couple of examples of that, 87% of residents are satisfied with the livability of their neighborhood, compared to only 4% who are dissatisfied. Then the other 9% give a neutral rating. 86% are satisfied with the overall quality of life in the city, compared to only 3% who are dissatisfied. We also took a look at the trends and found that the city's moving in the right direction. The satisfaction ratings have increased or stayed the same in 67 out of the 86 areas since 2011. In most of those cases, it's actually increased. I think it's only stayed the same in about 10 out of those 67 areas I mentioned. And the ratings have also increased or stayed the same in 67 out of 78 areas since 2007. We also found that Lawrence residents are satisfied with the overall quality of services compared to other communities. The city rated 25% above the Kansas City metro average and 24% above the national average in the overall quality of services provided by the city. And the city also rated above the KC metro average in 34 out of the 50 areas that were compared. And then the top overall priorities for the community over the next 2 years: maintenance of city streets, flow of traffic and congestion management, and quality of planning and code enforcement. So our first major finding is that residents have a positive perception of the city. On this question, we asked residents to rate various items that influence their perception of the city. You see that dark blue are very satisfied ratings, the lighter blue is satisfied, the white is neutral, and then the red are those who are dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. And there were as many people in a lot of cases who picked those answers, so we combined them together for this chart. So the things to me that really stand out here is that most residents are satisfied with the livability of their neighborhood and also with the quality of life in the city. You can see those are the top two items on that chart. And then the other thing is that only 3% of residents were dissatisfied with the quality of services provided by the city. That's a much, much lower number than we typically see. So here we have a map of the city. And what we did here is we broke down the survey results by census block group. And the reason for this is to see if residents in different parts of the city rate services differently. So the report contains, or there's an appendix to the report that contains a whole bunch of these maps. But this one is based on the overall quality of services provided by the city. So you can see the entire map is blue, which means that residents in all parts of the city are satisfied with city services. This is important to look at because sometimes, even if the overall satisfaction ratings are high, you'll still see certain pockets of the city where the residents are dissatisfied. So here, and that's not the case here, is the entire map is blue. So our next major finding is that satisfaction ratings have improved since the 2011 and the 2007 survey. This is our composite satisfaction index. And the purpose of this is to see how overall satisfaction ratings have changed since the first year we did the survey in 2007. So with 2007 as the baseline, you can see the ratings have increased for the city in each of the 2 years we did the survey since then. Whereas if you look at the U.S. average and the KC Metro average, the ratings are actually down a little bit since 2007. This chart shows overall satisfaction ratings with major categories of city services. And this is for each of the 3 years we did the survey. You see the blue is this past year, the darker blue. The light blue is 2011, and the yellow is 2007. So the satisfaction ratings have increased in 7 of the 9 areas since 2011. There's 4 areas that have had a significant increase. So you can see those with the blue arrows, the city trash and yard waste services, city parks and recreation system, water and wastewater services, and customer service. The one area that's gone down significantly since the last survey is planning and code enforcement. So since 2011, the ratings have gone up in 67 out of the 86 areas. So here's a list of the areas where the ratings have increased the most. The top one is the city's indoor recreation facilities. Ratings have increased by 17% since the 2011 survey. Ratings have increased by 16% in special events and parades, 15% in gym space, 13% how safe residents feel downtown after dark. I won't go through the whole list, but overall there's 13 areas where the satisfaction ratings have increased by 8% or more since the last survey in 2011. There's only 4 areas where the ratings have decreased by at least 5% since 2011. So those are listed there. There's only a much shorter list than the previous slide. And we also took a look at some of the changes since 2007. The ratings have increased or stayed the same in 67 out of 78 areas. So you can see the top one is beautification of downtown Lawrence. Satisfaction ratings have increased by 22% since 2007. Increased by 18% with the drop-off recycling sites. And again, I won't go through the whole list, but there's 13 areas here where the satisfaction ratings have increased by 9% or more since 2007.
Can you go back to that really quickly?
Sure.
I had some confusion here because one of the major concerns people appeared to have was congestion. Yet at the same time, ease of travel in every cardinal direction appears to have gone up.
Right. It doesn't mean that it's still not.
I'm confused how it got a lot easier to travel in Lawrence, but congestion got a lot worse.
And I think a lot of that increase was from 2007 to 2011. Because that's what this goes back to. So that's more of a long-term increase. In the short term, there wasn't much of an increase, if at all.
So long-term, it's been easier to travel, but on the short term, people are saying the congestion's worse?
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Gotcha.
Sure. So then we also found that satisfaction ratings overall for Lawrence are higher than the KC Metro and also the national averages. So here are the satisfaction ratings for various categories of city services. The blue are the results for the city. The red are the results for the KC Metro average. And the yellow are the U.S. national average. And the source of this data for the KC Metro is about 30 communities where we've administered surveys in the past 3 years. And then the yellow line, the U.S. average, every year we do a survey with about 4,000 randomly selected citizens from across the U.S. So that's the source of that data. So in 6 out of these 8 areas, the city rates significantly above the KC Metro average. Then you see there's just a couple of areas where it's significantly below. This one is based on perceptions of the city. You can see in 4 out of the 5 areas, Lawrence rates significantly above the KC Metro average. The one that stands out here the most to me is the third one down, overall quality of services provided by the city. I mentioned that earlier, but it's worth noting again. The city ranked 25% above the Metro average and 24% above the U.S. national average. Here are the comparisons for police services. A couple areas where the city ranked above the KC Metro significantly, 3 areas below. How safe residents feel in their community. The one that stood out to me here is the second one down. Overall feeling of safety in the city. Lawrence rated 8% above the Metro average, 9% above the U.S. average. Here's fire and ambulance. The most noteworthy one here to me is the top row. Overall quality of fire services. The city rated 7% above the KC Metro average. Here's parks and recreation, and this one the city rated significantly above the Metro and the U.S. average in all 8 of these areas. Maintenance and public works, a couple areas significantly above the Metro average, a couple areas below. Public information, just a couple of items rated in this category. And then solid waste disposal, city rated significantly above the Metro average in terms of trash, yard waste collection, and recycling services. So then we took a look at some of the top priorities of investment. We found those to be maintenance of city streets, flow of traffic and congestion management, and planning and code enforcement. So this is our important satisfaction analysis. And this is a combination of 2 questions on the survey. One question, we asked residents how satisfied they are with various services. We've seen that type of question a lot already. And then as a follow-up, we asked residents which of these services are the most important to emphasize over the next 2 years. So the areas you really want to focus on are those that have a high importance but also a low satisfaction. So the top overall priority, maintenance of city streets, you can see that ranked first in terms of importance and 8th out of 10 in satisfaction. And then closely behind that in terms of overall importance, flow of traffic and congestion, that ranks 2nd in importance and then 9th out of 10 in satisfaction. And then the 3rd highest priority, quality of planning and code enforcement, you see that's 4th in importance, last in satisfaction rating. And that one's in the high priority category, but if you see the number under important satisfaction rating, it's almost in the very high priority. And Giova, was there a question or? I'm sorry.
No, I just.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. So in Parks and Recreation, the satisfaction ratings were really high overall. So there's only one category that even fell into a high priority. Nothing in a very high priority. That was number of walking and biking trails. In maintenance and public works, top 2 priorities: timeliness of street maintenance repairs and condition of major city streets. This one's on water and wastewater utilities. So you see the top couple of priorities: quality of drinking water, and then value received for water or wastewater utility rates. Then on transportation, top overall priority: east-west travel in Lawrence. That ranked 1st in importance and then 6th out of 9 in satisfaction. So it's a top overall priority, and then followed by availability of safe routes to schools. Then it's a couple of other findings. Here we asked residents to indicate their preferred methods of communication from the city. Top 2 are local media outlets and direct mail. Then there's 3 categories that rank really close together: city newsletter, email blast, and the website. Here we asked residents which services they've used in the past year. 93% have put out recycling. And then there's 3 areas that a little over 3/4 of residents have used. Visited city recreation facilities, walking and biking trail or path, and the city library. And then here we give residents a list of 6 projects related to capital improvement plan and ask which 3 are the most important to prioritize over the next few years. You see the blue is their top choice, the red is their 2nd choice, and yellow is their 3rd. And overall, by far, the top choice was repair and restore deteriorating infrastructure. So just to summarize, we found that residents have a positive perception of the city. We saw some examples of that. We took a look at the trends, saw the city moving in the right direction. Lawrence residents, again, are very satisfied with the overall quality of city services in comparison to other communities. And then we took a look at the top overall priorities for improvement over the next couple of years. So with that, are there any questions?
We have questions for Jason or comments?
You know, you have no way to answer this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Because the traffic flow congestion, kind of what I was thinking that might be related to is last summer when we had so many east-west streets all under construction at the same time. I don't know if it's possible to, but I would imagine that might have something to do with it. I don't know.
It could. It's just when I was going through this before the meeting today, that was one thing that jumped out at me and kind of made, it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
People are really satisfied with how they can get east, west, north, and south, but they're very dissatisfied with congestion.
And when I think congestion, I think construction.
Okay.
So, but that's just a guess.
No, that's further with it than I'd got, so thank you.
And the other thing that'd be interesting to look at is the GIS maps, which is a separate appendix to the report, where it shows, like that one I showed before, where it shows if residents have different ratings in different parts of the city to see how that looked. Give you an idea also.
Jason, question back on item number 1, satisfaction item number 1. It talks about the city's efforts to promote economic development, and I see 30% are dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
What should we read into that? Dissatisfied with outcome, dissatisfied with, the promotions that we have going on. I'm trying to guess, I think.
Sure. You're looking at this slide here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That can mean a number of things. I don't know if we know exactly, just from the way it's worded in this survey, but we do have some cross-tabular analysis that show how results compare for different demographic groups. So I think that would be interesting to look at. Those are separate parts of the report as well.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't figure an answer to that one, and I just see the 30% dissatisfaction. I was just wondering. Okay.
Sure, that's something that we could look into a little more closely.
Is there a way to establish specific definitions for kind of some of these terms? Because when we say how well is the city planning growth,
right.
There could be folks who say we're not growing and we need to be, or folks who think we don't need to be growing and why are you asking me suggesting that we should? So are there some parameters that are typically established in these surveys that could kind of bring some more meat and potatoes to those skeletons, so to speak?
Right. Yeah, and again, I don't know if you can get too much without almost doing another survey asking more specifically in some of these areas. I don't know how you could. There's additional analysis like GIS maps and the crosstabs that can let you dig a little deeper.
Mayor, I think one thought that we have had as staff is that we can use this data as a starting point, and then our Lawrence Listens tool, which is a little more cost effective, to kind of do some of those drill down kinds of questions and say, our survey indicated dissatisfaction. Tell us more about why that is.
The problem with that is that this survey demonstrated that only 12% of our citizens want to receive stuff via social media. So
maybe we'll put commercials out for it on our local media outlets. But no, I agree. We need to find ways to get at that.
I think we need to do another survey.
Well, my understanding, this is essentially a scientifically generated survey, where Lawrence Listens is a self-selected group.
That's true.
Which, it seems like there's a basic difference there, although getting input from citizens is a good thing. It's just
another thing that we think will be interesting is looking at the results of this scientific survey and some of the data from Lawrence Listens to see as a check and balance of if it's a self-selected group, does it really impact the kind of direction that the data indicates.
I wanted to be able to scroll in on that map. There was the map where it talked about, it showed everywhere was blue, everyone was satisfied, but there was one particular neighborhood that was dark blue.
It was very bright.
Super blue.
Yeah.
Right. Where's that at?
6 in Iowa.
Yeah.
I'm moving.
Those
are happy people.
And we do have those maps for some of the other indicators, right?
Right. Yeah. Pretty much all the satisfaction questions we created maps for. So there's 80 or 90 maps.
Well, I guess my question only had to do with, like I said, the economic development. I just saw that, and I didn't know if there was really a way to read, anything into that. And you could probably go through any one of these items and, draw a different, answer out on any of these. So, but that one just kind of got me because we do, I think, try to do a great effort in trying to promote the community and stuff. And if we're going a wrong direction, at least from the survey, and being a scientific survey, as you brought up, I have concern there. So,
well, Meg, if you put that together with the flatline jobs indicator from Michael's report, that might have something to do with it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to also look at the trends on that. That's the reason why it's good to ask a lot of these same questions each time. Even though the satisfaction ratings are low, they might have gone up since the 2011 survey or the 2007 survey.
So with the items that have been brought to light, we need to do better repair of infrastructure in the budget that we published last week. There's like $8 million in street repair. So that just tells me that we're going to have all the streets shut down again. Traffic's not going to move. It's just
catch-22.
It's going to happen. Oh, well, we aim to please, I guess.
And those are, traffic flow and city street maintenance are always some of the areas rated as the most important. The key is kind of look at how the trends, how they've changed over time, and how they compare to other communities. But they're always going to be.
To look at it holistically too. I mean, people will always have something to complain about. The one thing that I took from it, and I think you put it right at the very front of the survey, where I forget how you worded it, but look at the bottom first or whatever. The only 3% surveyed said they were dissatisfied with Life in Lawrence.
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
That speaks volumes. I mean,
what's
really
3% of 1,300? We're talking maybe 5 people said that they were, give or take.
Yeah, that is a really low number. I mean, usually on average that number is more around 11 to 15%. That's a super low number.
But it's important too, as we talk about the infrastructure, and people recognize the amounts of money that are spent on infrastructure, and wanting to make sure that we are that we're constantly upgrading or keeping it up to date. I think that tells me a lot also.
I think it's also an indicator that folks are happy with the customer service they're getting from city employees, and that's a really important thing, so thank you.
Other comments?
I was impressed with the map that showed the responses and where they all came from and how evenly spread it was. That was really great.
Yeah, we had a really good representation throughout the city.
Excellent.
Jason, do you have the table, or can you access it handy that has the breakdown of the zip codes? I know that was a question that we had from an audience member. Is that in the report, or?
As far as how many answer the question from each zip code. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was your question, but we'll get to it when we have.
Yeah, it's in the full report. There's a section that has the tabular data section, which shows the numbers for each question on the survey, how many people selected each answer.
Okay, excellent.
The Vice Mayor brought up a point, Jason, about the map. If I could, that map there, is that area that looks like it's just south of campus? Is that primarily student housing? I was asking the mayor.
Which area are you?
The one that's kind of blank right there in this. Yeah, right there.
It's West Campus.
Is that West Campus?
Yeah.
Lead Center.
Okay.
In Iowa.
Not a whole lot of people right there.
Yeah. I need thicker glasses.
One person in Kentland dorm.
One person
Got
stayed.
it.
Well, I think the night we authorized this, I think you made a comment about
timing,
the timing, and in terms of getting response from college students, and it just wasn't particularly practical. I remember you'd said.
Right. Yeah, and students. Whenever we do these in communities with big colleges, students we don't never get a lot of student responses. They're here just temporarily in a lot of cases and aren't as invested in this type of thing.
It's unfortunate since they're about a fourth of our entire city.
Right.
I see the Highway 59 designation now. Just need to blow it up a little bigger. Okay. That's all I had, Mayor.
All right. Anything else for Jason? All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Stay close. All right, public comment on this item.
Thank you for
trying to get at
it. I hope that you will bear with me, and I hope I'll be able to get some answers, because I have spent an enormous amount of time on this and didn't call any of you, and did try and get answers, and I don't know Kevin by sight. Is she here?
That's Kevin.
Okay, I tried to reach you to get a copy of it. I couldn't even afford to print this thing off on my computer. But I think that we're being lulled into thinking this is something that it isn't. And it tells us a lot more than it purports to tell. Now, the smart thing for me to say is that I support the survey, since my luck with the commission is that not very lucky, but in reality I have serious concerns about the formulation, the interpretation, the presentation, and use and of the Commission's citizen survey from ETC Institute, and ask that its results not be considered valid as interpreted. Briefly, here are some of my areas of concern, which were partly what you were asking, Casey, but I asked Kevin today, and we just had a problem getting together. She had a lot of meetings and today, and then she just didn't know the answers on some of these. So it's sort of like, want to know who this pool of people is, not who the respondents are, like who'd you start with, you know, and what were their zip codes, and who did you, and then of the ones that you sent out, what were those zip codes, you know, relative to the total population in each zip code in Lawrence. And then finally there were the 1330 that they said, you know, were responded by zip code, and that information I was given. Thank you. But here briefly are some areas of concern, and I really hope, because she kept encouraging me today, Kevin, to ask questions at the meeting. So we're hoping that I'll be able to ask questions and get some answers, as opposed to just having to sit down and having wasted my day and evening. First, there is no information provided by the liaison from the city or easily accessible in the PowerPoint presentation posted last night that tells us the source or sources of the pool of respondents surveyed. It wasn't the water bills, it wasn't, you know, anything that could be pinned down, but I'm sure we can get an answer somehow. Apparently, multiple databases were purchased, including address and phone. Surely the address must have had a zip code. Now he's talking about emails too. So somewhere out there, they can purchase these databases of people. So how it was even representative of, you know, this city who was sent out, who received these, actually, we don't even know. I don't know. The address due to zip code. What was the pool of respondents chosen? Was it from the total city population, including KU? And what is the breakdown of that pool by zip code? The responses only showed 2 for 4-5, and that's a zip that was created specifically for KU some years ago. So I would imagine that. What is the Lawrence population breakdown by zip code? What is the breakdown of zip codes of the survey sent out? So on to number 2. This survey purports to be a 5-point Likert scale, yet it does not follow the structure of this type of scale as shown by academic and government survey research groups. In particular, it typically makes a statement and then asks about level of satisfaction with 5 choices. That's typical Likert scale, not typical this survey. Instead, it asks questions: how satisfied are you with? And presents 6 choices, which allows a respondent to opt out in not 1 but 2 ways, either by choosing neutral or don't know. This is not the typical structure of a Likert scale and does away with the 5-point scale. So, all of the above can lead to data which can be interpreted in many different manners. For instance, if you are asked, are you satisfied with recreation centers easily accessible to you? You might get a different answer than merely asking about how satisfied you are with recreation centers. While not being able to give a full review here, the survey limits choices available to respondents and sometimes combines others, such as fire and medical and police, when individual questions might give more useful information. When this item was first brought up by the commission on the commission agenda, I did a great deal of research on it, but then found it would be too late to produce it to the commission, as I did tell Commissioner Herbert some time ago, as it was stated on the agenda that the survey would be sent out that very week. So having done all this research on the internet and, you know, reliable websites about scales and so forth, I then didn't submit it because survey and it said it was going to be the results too late for the budget. It was also yet it appears it's being used for that purpose, budget and other decision-making. Unfortunately, I have not been able to reconstruct my original research given the time frame and the fact that the key city staffer has been tied up in meetings, although extremely pleasant and helpful. While this is only one example, the type of written transcribed city minutes, 3 months behind, makes following this, as well as other items as they go past the commission, difficult. I actually got one of these surveys, it must have been in 2007, and was shocked to see how the results were interpreted. I live near East 19th Street in the Barker neighborhood and was dissatisfied with the traffic east-west, meaning there was too much, please get it out of here, and that was used to justify increasing, traffic on East 19. I don't believe it's fitting to compare Lawrence with the KC metro area, and God knows what the database is that shows, United States cities. I mean, Detroit, Cleveland, whatever. Surely showing up as a little bit better than them is not saying a whole lot. But again, these people have. I'm in error in this fact that I just ran out of time, and I was trying to get this posted or sent to you folks, and I think the liker is supposed to say like a statement, and then you have like 5 choices. You've seen it. 1 to 5, 5 you like it the most, 1 you like the least, and so forth. And that would give you better information than how satisfied you are. I mean, I'm much more frightened to be downtown these days than I was in the past. There's lots of violence, it's very dark, there's a lot of late night concerts getting out, there's, not things for sort of adults that, used to be, and I don't find that at all, that's just my point of view. But so I would ask specifically questions, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the research before, but it had disappeared and I couldn't recreate it. I didn't have the time, and I thought I'd be able to find out, but I wasn't able to find out, what this pool, it wasn't a pool based on anything the city gave, and, what the population was, and, so if you don't know who you're asking, is it weighted towards people who have phone, some way that they can obtain through your database, the phones, the addresses and emails and so forth, and talked about following up with telephones and so forth and so on. And so that I don't think I've made my case in a very clear way, but in other words, if you look through the thing, if you look through the original survey, you'll see that the questions are just like, there's some where you don't have all your choices, you have limited choices, or you have things stuck together, and you just, I think that, I wouldn't know how to get to Rock Chalk Park if I tried. It's 5 miles from my house to get to Free State to try and use the shallow, warm pool. So I would, it would be hard to respond to that question, because are you talking about, it's great, let's build more, or are you talking about, well, I hear there's some nice ones in the city, but I can't access them. So I certainly can't readily access them, and I certainly couldn't access them by public transportation. So I don't know if I'm entitled to get answers, because how this pool was, and specifically the zip codes of the total number, the zip codes of the population of Lawrence, whether you use 94, 92, 95,000, if you included KU and so forth, what those zip codes would be, and the zip codes of the 2,500 that were sent out, and the zip codes of the ones that responded.
Well, the sooner you wrap it up, we can get your questions answered.
That's what I was just trying to. I know I'm not supposed to speak directly to him, but
Okay.
I've been trying to ask these questions, and
Go ahead and have a seat, and we'll have him come up and answer your questions in the microphone.
I appreciate it because I really can't stress enough how wrongly done this survey was, and we should not be taking it as seriously as it's being taken.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair. Jason, do you want to address I think it's all in the, if I understand it right, it's all in the, not the PowerPoint, but the original.
Yeah, some of it is in the full report. And as far as how the addresses were selected, we purchased a list of addresses from a list brokerage firm called Info USA. And from that list, we randomly select 2,500 households to select a survey. Our company president, Dr. Tatham, uses a random number generator to select those households.
Patricia, would it help if you moved up closer? Would you be able to hear better?
Sorry. I couldn't hear that number, and I'm trying to write it down at the same time.
So you might speak a little slower.
Sure.
Because I'm old.
So you can take notes.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, we purchased a mailing list from a list brokerage firm called Info Group USA. It used to be Edith Roman, who we've used since the early 80s, but now they were bought by Info Group USA. And from that list, we randomly select households to receive the survey. And the key to having the results statistically valid is that they're randomly selected and that we get a good distribution geographically, and also that the demographics of those who fill out a survey are comparable to the actual demographics of the city. So that's why there's a number of demographic questions in the survey, like gender, ethnicity, age group. So we always make sure that those answers for the survey results are comparable to the actual city. So we always check all of that. I don't know if does that answer your question?
You randomly selected households by the demographics, and what else?
Well, they're randomly selected, but then as the results come in, we check the demographics to make sure they're comparable to the actual demographics of the city.
And you mentioned specifically location, income, whatever?
Yeah, location, age, gender, ethnicity, those are really the key. Those are the most important ones.
I guess that was just, I just still don't understand what you have purchased, what that list is, and if it's a list of the full population of the city.
Yeah, it's a list of the full population, and then we just randomly select households from that group.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Sure.
All right. Any other public comment on this item? All right. I'd entertain a motion to receive the presentation of the 2015 Citizen Survey.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to approve by Commissioner Bully, seconded by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Commissioner Herbert. Future agenda items. Looks like we've got the budget public hearing and adoption of budget, 1231 Pennsylvania. For you, I was waiting on you, and then there was a silence, and so I didn't know if that was my cue to just...
Yeah, take it away.
RS5 zoning in North Lawrence.
Don't
freeze up.
I didn't. I just hadn't started, but yeah, you're doing great.
I don't think Ted Boyle's going to be here next week, and then zoning options in East Lawrence, and we'll also have the benefit district for 6th and East 9th Street, right?
Yes.
So a pretty lengthy meeting next week, it would appear.
And it seems like items keep coming up, so... Yeah.
So all these have to be on August 4th.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to bring out some public input, so we're going to want to make sure we're moving people through. Everyone has a chance to speak and that no one is chased away.
Vice Mayor, I think also we were sensitive to, if you aren't here on the 11th, that there were items that we didn't want to have when you weren't able to be here. So,
that's what I'm kind of wondering here is perhaps a couple of them might be moved to a different date.
Maybe moving the RS5 zoning Do we want to keep zoning options in East Lawrence on for next week?
Or do you want to do it in 2 weeks?
Hmm?
You going to be, no, Vice Mayor, you going to be here the 11th?
No. Maybe we can move North Lawrence and 6th Street to the 11th. And then
6th Street.
August 4th will be
No, it's already published.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Because we've already published the public hearing date for that.
Can we move 1231 Pennsylvania perhaps to the 18th?
I think that's been published for that date as well. Maybe there was a chain going.
Yeah, I would think the only movement options we would have would be with zoning for
Staff
North
memos.
Lawrence and East Lawrence. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think that's correct.
Move the staff memos
The 18th.
to the 18th.
We can do that.
Let's do that. Is that okay?
Then we can have a zoning night.
Yeah, we're here every Tuesday, so
So both North Lawrence and
Make it.
East.
Thank you.
and-
Sorry, guys. I certainly don't want to stack up August 4th on us either.
Yeah. I thought tonight would be a short meeting, but who was that kidding? All right. Any commission items tonight?
Nope.
So
I can't. I went to the 25th anniversary celebration of the Americans with Disability Act, and one of the things I learned was that we do not have a loop in this room for hearing aids, and so that is something that we should look into.
Megan can address that issue.
Okay?
Commissioners, last week we met with two individuals, Dick, and I'm going to say his name incorrectly,
Meidinger.
Yeah.
And I believe the other lady was Dolores, about hearing loops specifically.
Right.
When we looked into hearing loops a few years ago, it required us to put the loop in the floor, which caused some issues. So now the new technology allows us to put it above and closer to the ceiling.
Right.
And so we're looking into that, and we have a September 1st deadline that we wanted to get back to them and let them know how we'd be proceeding.
Great.
But I don't think that adding a hearing loop is going to be difficult in this room.
Right.
The other thing that we looked into was he gave us some information on a kind of a smaller area hearing loop. And we thought that a solution like that at the utility billing calendar, utility billing window, would be very good for people with hearing loss there as well. So
Well, one of the concerns is if we do this room, then what do we do about outside? Are we going to have seating for folks in here specifically designated? So there's some issues. I appreciate you working on it. Thank you very much.
You can do a very small area of hearing loop out there as well, but basically attaches to the TV if that's something we need to do.
Yeah. Great.
Mayor, I have one more thing to add. Yesterday I had a chance to go to the public feedback session for the Free State Festival. Pretty good turnout, really good feedback on that. This is an event that we're going to keep doing year after year and hopefully make it better. The reason I bring it up, just kind of for the public record here, is Sarah Bishop at the Lawrence Arts Center. She's kind of the guru for it. She's asked that anyone who didn't have a chance to attend Monday and wants to give feedback, either critical or positive on the event, email her. Her email is Sarah with an H at lawrenceartscenter.org.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Any other commission items?
Are you still talking about the ADA?
No. Okay. Calendar?
We did add a few items to the calendar. The Douglas County Food Policy Council item. If there are other items we need to add, let us know.
Okay. Thank you, Casey. All right. If there's nothing else, consider a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second. Motion made second to adjourn by Commissioners Amix and Herbert. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Good night.